On a freezing winter night at a lonely bus stop, a young black nurse sat shivering, waiting for a bus that wouldn't come until 3 a.m., her hands numb after losing her wallet and phone. Just as the cold was about to overwhelm her, a luxury car pulled up, and a young man stepped out, concern in his eyes, as he asked, "Are you okay? Get in. It's dangerous out here." But what the nurse didn't know was that the moment she stepped into that car, her entire life would change in ways she could never have imagined. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell me, where are you listening from? And don't forget to subscribe so I can bring you more stories tomorrow. The rigid metal of the bus shelter bench bit into Eleanor Vance's back, a cruel reminder of the biting winter air. For the third time in a mere 10 minutes, her fingers now stiff with cold, fumbled through her empty pockets. A sickening wave of realization washed over her, chilling her far deeper than the swirling snow outside the glass shelter. Everything was gone. Her wallet, her mobile phone, her transit pass, even the $20 bill she habitually tucked into her shoe for unforeseen emergencies. Someone had callously pilfered it all, while she'd momentarily dozed off during a brief reprieve at the hospital where she served as a dedicated nurse. The digital display board confirmed her predicament. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another hour. At 2:30 in the morning, the city streets of Havenwood were eerily quiet, punctuated only by the hurried whoosh of an occasional car, its headlights briefly slicing through the inky darkness before vanishing once more. Eleanor cinched her thin scrub jacket tighter around her shoulders, a futile gesture against the cold that relentlessly seeped into her very bones. She had been on her feet for a grueling 14 hours, having selflessly covered a shift for a colleague who had called in sick. Her supervisor's promise of overtime pay, a small comfort at the time, offered no warmth now. The intensity of the cold made her teeth chatter uncontrollably, and she could barely register any sensation in her fingers. Each breath escaped her lips as a stark white cloud, emphasizing her profound solitude on that frozen urban thoroughfare. A sleek, dark-colored sedan glided to a halt as it approached the bus stop, its engine a low, quiet purr. Eleanor's muscles tensed, her mind instantly recalling countless warnings against accepting rides from strangers. Yet as the elegant vehicle eased to the curb, she could clearly discern the driver through the passenger window, a man of impeccable dress, with eyes that seemed remarkably kind fixed upon her with what appeared to be genuine concern. The window hummed softly as it lowered, releasing a welcome wave of warm air into the frigid night. "Excuse me, are you all right?" His voice was deep, yet remarkably gentle. "You look absolutely frozen." Eleanor instinctively wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "I'm fine, thank you," she managed, though her voice quivered, betraying the undeniable chill that had settled deep within her. "It's almost 3 in the morning, and the temperature is well below freezing out there." He observed his gaze, studying her face, taking in her evident exhaustion and the uncontrollable shivers that racked her body. "When's the last bus?" She hesitated, reluctant to disclose her vulnerability, but the cold was making clear thought a struggle. "Not for another hour," she admitted. The man's expression deepened with worry. "You'll risk hypothermia waiting out here that long. Please let me offer you a ride. I can see from your scrubs that you're a nurse. I assure you, I'm not some random individual seeking to cause trouble." Something in his sincere tone prompted Eleanor to observe him more closely. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark, neatly combed hair and a coat that unmistakably bespoke luxury. The car itself was an opulent marvel, sumptuous leather, seating a dashboard that seemed more akin to a sophisticated command center than an automobile's interior. Yet it was his eyes that truly held her attention, reflecting an unfeigned concern utterly devoid of the calculating, predatory gaze she had learned to identify during her many years of night shifts across the city. "I don't even know you," Eleanor stated, though. The words lacked conviction, hollowed by the encroaching cold that was fast becoming unbearable, her strength noticeably waning. "My name is Arthur Kingsley," he replied smoothly. "I'm the CEO of Apex Solutions, a technology firm downtown." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, retrieving a crisp business card and holding it for her to clearly see through the window. "I was driving home from a very late meeting when I saw you here. Look, I completely understand your hesitation, but you're genuinely in significant danger if you remain out here much longer." Eleanor stared at the card, recognizing the corporate name from various news reports she'd encountered. Apex Solutions was widely known as one of the city's largest and most reputable employers. She had certainly heard of Arthur Kingsley. He was noted not only for his entrepreneurial success, but also for his philanthropic endeavors and equitable business practices. Still, accepting rides from total strangers flew in the face of every cautionary lesson she had ever learned. But as another sharp gust of wind pierced her thin jacket, she faced a grim reality she might very well have no other option. Her hands were so thoroughly numb she could barely articulate her fingers, and her legs felt treacherously unsteady beneath her. The mere prospect of settling into that warm, inviting car was almost overwhelmingly tempting. "I can contact the local police if you wish," Arthur offered, as if sensing her profound internal struggle. "They can verify my identity, or even follow us to ensure you arrive home safely." The sheer kindness embedded in his offer genuinely surprised her. Most people, especially those of his apparent wealth, would have simply driven past by now. "Why do you care what happens to me?" she asked, her voice raspy. Arthur was silent for a moment, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. "My mother was a nurse." He began, his voice soft but clear. "She worked many night shifts at the county hospital for 2 decades. She often had to wait for buses, sometimes in neighborhoods much like this one. She always maintained that the people who truly kept the city functioning, nurses, sanitation workers, security guards, were the very individuals society tended to overlook when they most desperately needed assistance." Something in his earnest voice convinced Eleanor he spoke the truth. Her grandmother Margaret had always instilled in her the importance of trusting her gut instincts about people, and at this precise moment, her instincts were telling her that Arthur Kingsley was exactly who he claimed to be. "Where would you take me?" Eleanor asked, the words barely a whisper. "Wherever you need to go," Arthur responded promptly. "Home. Or if you're hungry, there's a 24-hour diner about 10 minutes from here, where you can warm up and get something to eat." At the mere mention of food, Eleanor's stomach rumbled audibly. She hadn't eaten since her lunch break, which now felt like a lifetime ago. But more than hunger, it was the relentless cold that ultimately sealed her decision. She could feel her strength ebbing away with each passing minute, and the thought of enduring another hour in such brutal weather seemed utterly impossible. "Okay," she finally conceded, pushing herself up on shaky legs. "But I want to go to the diner first. I need to call my grandmother to let her know I'm okay." Arthur offered the first genuine smile she had seen all day. "Of course, whatever you need." As Eleanor walked around to the passenger door, she caught an unsettling glimpse of her reflection in the car's polished window. She looked utterly exhausted and visibly frightened, her dark complexion appearing almost ashen from the cold. Her usually neat, natural hair was pulled back in a bun that had clearly come loose during her grueling shift, and her scrubs were wrinkled and stained from the demanding night at the hospital. Arthur leaned across the expansive interior to open the door for her, and as she settled into the plush, warm leather seat, a palpable measure of the tension that had gripped her for hours began to dissipate. The gentle hum of the heater filled the space, and soft, soothing jazz music played quietly from the speakers. "Thank you," she said, her fingers trembling slightly as she buckled her seatbelt. "Don't mention it," Arthur replied smoothly, engaging the car in drive and pulling away from the curb. "I'm Arthur, by the way. What's your name?" "Eleanor Vance. It's a pleasure to meet you, Eleanor. I'm truly sorry it's under these rather difficult circumstances." He glanced at her kindly as they paused at a red light. "What happened to leave you stranded out there?" A wave of embarrassment washed over Eleanor as she recounted falling asleep during her break and waking to find all her possessions gone. "I should have been more careful," she mumbled, looking down. "I was just so tired." "Hey, that's absolutely not your fault," Arthur stated firmly, his voice laced with indignation. "You shouldn't have to worry about being robbed while you're trying to rest after working all night diligently caring for people." His unexpected anger on her behalf surprised her. She was accustomed to people assuming that any misfortune that befell her was somehow a consequence of her own errors or poor choices. To have someone immediately defend her felt utterly strange, yet undeniably comforting. As they navigated the hushed city streets, Eleanor found herself discreetly observing Arthur's profile. He possessed strong, defined features and an aura of self-assuredness, clearly a byproduct of significant success. Yet interwoven with this confidence was a noticeable gentleness evident in the careful way he drove over patches of ice and kept the jazz music softly playing, allowing for comfortable conversation. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured as they pulled into the diner's parking lot. "Why were you really out this late?" "Most business meetings don't typically extend until 3 in the morning." Arthur switched off the engine and settled back in his seat. For a brief moment, Eleanor thought he might evade the question. Then he spoke, his voice contemplative. "I couldn't sleep. I've been struggling with that lately, so I went to my office to work. Sometimes keeping busy is easier than lying awake just thinking about things." There was an underlying note in his voice that made Eleanor wish to ask about the nature of those troubling thoughts, but she felt they hadn't known each other long enough for such a personal inquiry. Instead, she said, "I understand that. I work so many double shifts partly because I need the money, but also because it's easier than sitting at home worrying endlessly about my grandmother's medical bills." Arthur regarded her with a new, deeper understanding. "Is she unwell?" "Yes, she has diabetes and heart problems." Eleanor explained, a familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "The medications are incredibly expensive, and she needs someone to check on her regularly. I work at 3 different places: the hospital, a local clinic, and I do private care on weekends. It's still barely enough." "That must be exhausting." "It is," Eleanor affirmed. "But she raised me after my parents passed away. I owe her everything." Eleanor opened the car door, grateful for the diner's bright lights, now clearly visible through the windows. "She's probably worried sick about me right now." As they walked toward the diner's entrance, Arthur offered, "You can use my phone to call her if you want. I know you said yours was stolen." This simple offer of help, entirely without preconditions, tightened Eleanor's chest with emotion. She had spent so long instinctively mistrusting people's motives that she had almost forgotten there were genuinely kind individuals left in the world. "Thank you," she said, and meant it with a sincerity deeper than he could possibly fathom. The interior of the diner was a comforting haven, radiating warmth and light, adorned with classic red vinyl booths and permeated by the inviting aromas of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon. A scattering of other late-night patrons occupied various spots: a lone truck driver engrossed in a newspaper, a young couple quietly sharing a slice of pie, and an elderly gentleman contemplatively nursing a cup of coffee at the counter. Arthur chose a booth situated towards the back, offering a measure of privacy. As they settled in across from each other, Eleanor realized with a profound sense of relief that this was the first time in many months she had sat down in a place that felt genuinely safe and warm, entirely free from the nagging worry about the cost. "Order whatever you want," Arthur said, extending a menu to her. "My treat." Eleanor began to protest, but he gently raised a hand. "Please. You've had a truly dreadful night, and you're actually helping me too. I dislike eating alone, and I was likely going to end up here anyway." As she perused the menu, instinctively searching for the most inexpensive options, Eleanor found herself wondering if this peculiar night might, against all odds, evolve into something unexpectedly positive. For the first time in weeks, a fragile sense of hope bloomed within her, suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, everything might eventually be all right. She remained blissfully unaware, however, that someone had been observing them both from the very moment Arthur's car had pulled up to the bus stop, and that her troubles were in fact far from over. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and silver hair neatly secured in a ponytail, approached their table, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "What can I get you folks?" she inquired. Eleanor, still trying to minimize the cost, ordered the cheapest item she could find, a simple bowl of soup and a piece of toast. But before she could finish, Arthur subtly shook his head. "She'll have the turkey club with fries, and I'll take the same," he instructed the waitress, then turned his gaze to Eleanor. "You need real food after the night you've had. I can't let you pay for all that," Eleanor protested gently, but Arthur waved her off. "It's just a sandwich. Besides, you're doing me a favor by keeping me company." He then slid his mobile phone across the table towards her. "Why don't you call your grandmother while we wait for the food?" Eleanor picked up the expensive-looking device with careful hands. Her grandmother's number was one of the precious few she had memorized, and it rang only twice before a worried voice answered. "Hello, Grandma. It's me. I'm okay." "Eleanor, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach your phone for hours. Where are you?" Eleanor began to explain what had transpired, carefully omitting some of the more frightening details to spare her grandmother additional worry. As she spoke, she noticed Arthur subtly pretending to read the menu, though it was clear he was listening intently, ensuring she was truly safe and unharmed. You got into a car with a stranger, her grandmother's voice. Margaret rose sharply with understandable concern. I know it sounds wild, Grandma, but I was genuinely going to freeze to death out there, and he's… Eleanor glanced across the table at Arthur, who had now truly immersed himself in reading his menu, offering her a measure of privacy. He's a good person. I can just tell. After a few more minutes of earnestly reassuring her grandmother that she was safe and would be home soon, Eleanor concluded the call and gently slid the phone back across the table to Arthur. She sounds like she loves you very much. Arthur observed a soft smile on his lips. She does. Sometimes I think too much, Eleanor admitted, wrapping her hands around her warm coffee mug, savoring the comforting heat. She worries about me working so much, but she doesn't quite understand that I don't really have a choice. Arthur leaned forward slightly. Tell me about her. What's she like? Something in his tone made Eleanor feel that he genuinely wished to know, rather than simply making polite conversation. She's incredible. The strongest person I've ever met. Eleanor began, a soft smile gracing her lips. She was a dedicated teacher for 40 years, raised 5 children of her own, and then took me in when I was 8, after my parents died in a car accident. That must have been incredibly difficult for both of you. It was Eleanor confirmed, but she never not once made me feel like a burden. She used to say I was her gift from God, sent to keep her young. Eleanor chuckled softly at the memory. She taught me everything: how to cook, how to study, how to stand up for myself. But mostly, she taught me that caring for people is the most important thing you can possibly do with your life. Is that why you became a nurse? Partly yes, but also because it's steady work, and the medical field always needs capable people. Eleanor replied, taking a sip of her coffee. I wanted a career where I'd never have to worry about finding a job. What about you, Arthur? What inspired you to start your own company? Arthur was quiet for a moment, carefully choosing his words. My father. He worked for other people his entire life, always worried about layoffs, about budget cuts. I watched him stress constantly about providing for our family, never truly feeling secure, no matter how diligently he worked. I decided I wanted to be in control of my own future. That makes perfect sense. Is he proud of what you've built? A fleeting shadow crossed Arthur's face. I hope so. It's hard to tell these days. He has Alzheimer's, and most of the time he doesn't remember who I am. Eleanor's heart ached with profound sympathy. I'm so sorry, Arthur. That must be incredibly difficult. It is, he affirmed, his voice soft, yet laden with pain. He was my hero, growing up, this strong, brilliant man who could fix anything and solve any problem. Now he needs help with everything. And half the time, he thinks I'm a stranger trying to hurt him. Arthur trailed off, staring into his coffee cup. The worst part is knowing that somewhere inside he's still there, but I just can't reach him. Where is he now? Eleanor asked gently. I have him in a memory care facility, Arthur replied. It's the best one in the entire state, with excellent staff and all the latest treatments. But, he sighed, a profound weariness in his tone. I visit him every single day, but I can't shake this feeling that I'm failing him, like I should be doing more. Eleanor reached across the table, her fingers gently touching his hand. You are not failing him, Arthur. Caring for someone with Alzheimer's is far more than most people can handle on their own. The very fact that you visit every day and ensure he has the best possible care shows precisely how much you love him. Arthur looked up at her, surprise and a flicker of gratitude evident in his eyes. Thank you for saying that. Most people just don't understand. I work with many families dealing with similar situations, Eleanor explained briefly, squeezing his hand before withdrawing. The guilt is always the hardest part, but your father raised you to be successful and caring. Even if he can't remember it now, that's still an intrinsic part of who you are because of him. The waitress returned with their food, and they ate in a comfortable, companionable silence for a while. Eleanor couldn't recall the last time she had savored such a delicious sandwich, or the last time she had felt this relaxed while conversing with someone new. Can I ask you something? Arthur inquired as they neared the end of their meal. Certainly. How do you manage it? He asked, a genuine curiosity in his voice. Working 3 jobs, caring for your grandmother, and still managing to be so incredibly kind to strangers. You could have been angry about being robbed, or deeply suspicious of me, or bitter about your entire situation. But you're not. Eleanor considered the question thoughtfully. I suppose because being angry takes energy I simply don't have to spare, she mused. And my grandmother always taught me that how you treat people says far more about you than it does about them. Plus, bad things happen to everyone. Sometimes the crucial difference is whether you let them make you hard or whether you use them to understand other people's struggles better. That's remarkable wisdom for someone so young, Arthur commented sincerely. I'm 26. Eleanor corrected with a small smile. Not that young. Arthur chuckled. I'm 32, and I don't think I'm half as wise as you are. Their conversation was interrupted by Arthur's phone buzzing softly on the table. He glanced at the screen, a slight frown creasing his brow. Problem? Eleanor inquired. Just my night security service checking in, he replied, silencing the phone and placing it back down. They perform regular sweeps of my residence and office. Probably nothing, but they are very thorough. It must be comforting to have that level of security, Eleanor mused. It's a necessity when you operate a successful business. Arthur explained, his expression growing serious. Unfortunately, success sometimes attracts the wrong kind of attention. I've had some issues with competitors attempting to pilfer company secrets. And a few years ago, someone even broke into my house specifically targeting financial documents. That's unsettling, Eleanor commented. It is. But I've learned to be extremely careful. That's precisely why I have the security service, and why I'm probably more cautious than most people about whom I choose to trust. Eleanor looked at him with genuine curiosity. Then why did you trust me enough to bring me here? Arthur met her gaze directly, because sometimes you can just tell when someone has a good heart. And because I think we both needed a measure of kindness tonight. As they prepared to depart the diner, Arthur firmly insisted on paying the check, despite Eleanor's gentle protests. Outside, the snow had ceased falling, but the air remained bitterly cold. Where do you live? Arthur asked as they re-entered his car. Eleanor provided him with her address, which he promptly programmed into his GPS. As they drove through the quiet, snow-dusted streets, she found herself secretly wishing the ride would extend longer. It had been an immeasurably long time since she had engaged in such a genuine conversation with anyone, and Arthur made her feel heard in a way that was both unfamiliar and remarkably comforting. Thank you, she said as they pulled up in front of her grandmother's small, modest house. For everything. I truly don't know what I would have done without your help. I'm just glad I was there, Arthur responded, turning to face her. Eleanor, can I ask you something else? Of course. Would you be interested in a job? He inquired carefully. I mean, in addition to what you're already doing if you need the money. Eleanor's heart gave a sudden hopeful leap. What kind of job? My father needs a private nurse, Arthur explained. Someone who truly understands dementia care and can be incredibly patient with him. The facility is excellent, but he requires more one-on-one attention than they can reasonably provide. I've been searching for the right person for months. I don't have any specialized training in dementia care. Eleanor admitted her initial hope tempered by uncertainty. But you have extensive experience with elderly patients, and more importantly, you possess compassion, Arthur countered. That's what he needs most. Arthur paused, letting his words sink in. It would be very good money, probably more than you make at all three of your current jobs combined. And it would provide you with more time to spend with your own grandmother. Eleanor stared at him, barely daring to believe what she was hearing. Why would you offer this to me? You barely know me. Because in the last few hours, you've shown me more genuine kindness and understanding than most people I've known for years, Arthur explained simply. And because I believe you would be exactly what my father needs. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. Just think about it. Arthur pulled out another business card, writing something on the back. That's my personal number. Call me when you've decided. As Eleanor stepped out of the car, her mind spun with a whirlwind of possibilities. A job that paid exceptionally well and involved work for which she was already trained seemed almost too good to be true. But as Arthur drove away with a friendly wave, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, her terrible night was slowly transforming into the beginning of something truly wonderful. She had no way of knowing that someone had followed them from the diner all the way to her house and was at that very moment meticulously taking pictures of her front door. Eleanor barely slept that night. Her mind incessantly replayed her conversation with Arthur, leaving her to wonder if his job offer was genuinely real or merely a vivid dream. When her alarm chimed at 6 a.m, signaling her upcoming shift at the clinic, she felt as though she had only just closed her eyes. Her grandmother, Margaret Vance, was already awake, seated at the kitchen table, with her morning medications meticulously arranged in a neat row. Margaret, at 73 years old, moved with the determined energy of someone considerably younger. Her silver hair was styled perfectly, and she wore a bright yellow sweater that seemed to make her dark skin glow. "Morning, dear Margaret said, looking up from her pill organizer. You were out rather late last night. I told you what happened," Grandma Eleanor replied, kissing her grandmother's cheek before pouring herself a cup of coffee. "The gentleman who helped me, he offered me a job." Margaret's tone was tinged with skepticism. "A rich man offering jobs to pretty young women he'd just met. I've certainly heard that story before, dear." It's not like that Grandma Eleanor insisted sitting down across from her grandmother. He needs a private nurse for his father who has Alzheimer's. It's legitimate work. And you're sure about his intentions? Eleanor took a breath. I know it sounds wild, but yes, he was incredibly respectful the entire time. Never once made me feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And Grandma, the money he mentioned, it could truly change everything for us. Margaret studied her granddaughter's face with a discerning eye. You've always been a good judge of character, Eleanor, but desperation can sometimes cloud judgment. Be careful, dear. If something seems too good to be true, it usually is. I know, but what if it isn't? What if this is just good luck for once? Before Margaret could offer another word, a sharp knock echoed at the front door. Both women instantly froze. It was barely past 6 in the morning, and they certainly weren't expecting anyone. Eleanor cautiously peered through the peephole, discerning a man in a dark coat standing on their porch. He appeared ordinary enough, middle-aged, average height, clean-shaven, but something about his posture too still too alert instantly put Eleanor on edge. "Can I help you?" she called out through the closed door. "I'm looking for Eleanor Vance. I have some questions about last night." Eleanor's heart began to pound. "Who are you?" "My name is Investigator Hayes. I'm investigating a robbery in your area." Eleanor looked back at her grandmother, who had moved closer, listening intently. Margaret shook her head subtly. Their quiet residential neighborhood rarely saw detectives, especially not at dawn. "Can you show me some identification?" Eleanor requested. The man held up a badge to the peephole, but it was difficult to see clearly through the small opening. "I just need to ask a few questions about what happened to you at the bus stop," Investigator Hayes stated. Something felt profoundly wrong. Eleanor had reported thefts before, and the police had never followed up so quickly or so early in the morning. Furthermore, how would he even know where she lived? "I'm sorry, but I'm late for work," Eleanor said firmly. "Can we do this later? It'll just take a minute. I understand you got a ride from someone last night. I need to know about that person." Now Eleanor was truly alarmed. The only plausible way this man could know about Arthur was if he had been watching them. She remembered Arthur's earlier mention of his security concerns, and suddenly this felt far more ominous. "I really can't talk right now," she stated firmly. "If you're a real detective, you can contact me through proper channels." She heard footsteps retreating from the door, and after waiting several cautious minutes, she carefully peered out the window. The man was gone, but a dark sedan, which had not been there the previous night, was conspicuously parked across the street. "Grandma, I think we need to call the police," Eleanor said, her voice strained. "Real police this time," Margaret agreed, already reaching for the telephone. The actual police arrived within 20 minutes. 2 uniformed officers who meticulously checked their identification and patiently took Eleanor's statement, detailing both the theft and the unsettling morning visitor. They appeared genuinely concerned about the purported detective and pledged to increase patrols in the neighborhood. "Do you have somewhere safe you can stay for a few days?" one of the officers inquired, "until we figure out precisely what this individual wanted." Eleanor immediately thought of Arthur's job offer. "Perhaps. Can I ask you something? If someone was watching me because of the person who helped me last night, would that put them in danger too?" Possibly, the officer conceded. "Do you have a way to contact this person and warn them?" Eleanor pulled out Arthur's business card. "I have his number. I'd recommend calling him as soon as possible," the officer advised. After the police departed, Eleanor sat in the kitchen with her grandmother, attempting to process the bewildering turn of events. The job offer that had seemed like a timely blessing now felt burdened with complication and potential danger. "Call him," Margaret said decisively. "If someone's targeting both of you, he absolutely needs to know." Eleanor dialed Arthur's number with trembling hands. He answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon." "Arthur, something's wrong," Eleanor blurted out. "A man came to my house this morning, pretending to be a detective, asking questions about you. The real police think someone might be watching both of us." There was a long, heavy pause on Arthur's end. "Are you okay? Are you safe?" For now, yes. But I think your security concerns might be more serious than you thought. I'm coming to get you. What? No, you don't need to, Eleanor. Listen to me. Arthur's voice was firm, yet gentle. If someone followed us last night and knows where you live, you're in danger because of me. I'm not going to leave you to deal with that alone. But I barely know you. Why would you put yourself at risk for me? Eleanor exclaimed. Arthur's voice was firm, but gentle. Because it's the right thing to do. And because after last night, Eleanor, I feel like I know you better than people I've worked with for years. Pack a bag for you and your grandmother. You're both coming to stay with me until we figure out what's going on. Arthur, that's insane. We can't just move into your house. Yes, you can, he countered unequivocally. I have plenty of space, excellent security, and you'll be much safer there than where you are now. He paused, then added, besides, if you're going to take the job caring for my father, you'll need to be close by anyway. I haven't said yes to the job yet, Eleanor reminded him. Then consider this a trial period, Arthur proposed. Stay for a few days, meet my father, see if it's something you want to do. If not, I'll help you find somewhere else safe to stay. Eleanor looked at her grandmother, who had been listening to the entire conversation. Margaret nodded encouragingly. Okay, Eleanor agreed, albeit with a slight hesitation, but just for a few days. Thank you. I'll be there in 30 minutes. As Eleanor hung up the phone, she couldn't help but wonder what exactly she was getting herself into. Just 24 hours ago, her most pressing worry had been managing her grandmother's medical bills. Now she was seemingly entangled in some perilous situation involving a man she had only just met and was about to move into his home. Are you sure about this, dear? Margaret asked, already beginning to pack her medications into a small travel case. No, Eleanor admitted honestly, but I am sure that staying here isn't safe, and I trust Arthur to protect us. Why? Margaret pressed gently. Eleanor considered this. She thought about Arthur's profound kindness, the night before, the earnest way he spoke of his father, the genuine concern evident in his voice when she had called. Because he could have simply warned me over the phone and told me to handle it myself, she explained. Instead, he's putting himself at more risk to keep us safe. That tells me everything I need to know about who he is. As they packed their sparse belongings, Eleanor consciously attempted to quell her nervousness about the unknown. She had spent her entire life cultivating caution and self-reliance, and now she was about to entrust her and her grandmother's safety to someone she had known for less than 12 hours. Yet sometimes she realized taking a profound leap of faith was the only viable path forward. And maybe, just maybe, this leap would land her somewhere significantly better than where she had started. Outside, the ominous dark sedan remained parked across the street, and someone inside was still unnervingly taking pictures of her house. Arthur arrived precisely 30 minutes later, not in the luxurious sedan from the previous night, but in a different vehicle, a dark blue SUV with tinted windows, which seemed far more practical. Eleanor watched from the living room window as he stepped out, his gaze carefully sweeping the street before he approached their front door. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," Arthur greeted warmly when Margaret opened the door. "I'm Arthur Kingsley. I'm truly sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Margaret looked him up and down with the discerning, critical eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating people. "You're the one who helped my granddaughter last night." "Yes, ma'am." "And now, you're bringing trouble to our door." Margaret's tone was direct, unyielding. Arthur's expression remained respectful, but undeniably serious. "I'm afraid so, and I take full responsibility for that, which is precisely why I'm here to make sure both of you stay safe." "How do I know you're not the one we need protection from?" Margaret asked a fair question that underscored her sharp, protective instincts. Arthur reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "Would you like to call my security company? They can verify who I am and explain the situation. Or I can give you the number for the police detective who's been handling my case for the past 6 months." Margaret studied his face for a long moment. "You have kind eyes, young man, like your mother probably did. But kind eyes don't always signify a kind heart." "You're absolutely right," Arthur conceded, his gaze steady. "All I can tell you is that I'm trying to do the right thing, and I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that." Something in his sincere tone must have satisfied Margaret, because she finally stepped aside to let him in. "The bags are by the door. Eleanor's in the kitchen, probably overthinking this whole situation." Arthur smiled faintly at that. "She seems like someone who thinks things through carefully. Too carefully sometimes. She's been taking care of everyone else for so long, she's forgotten how to let other people take care of her. When Arthur found Eleanor in the kitchen, she was standing by the window, nervously watching the street. "Is the car still there?" he asked. "Yes, same spot, same person sitting inside." She turned to face him, her eyes wide with fear. "Arthur, I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening or why someone would be watching me." "I think I do," Arthur replied gravely. He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Can we sit? I need to explain some things I should have told you last night." They sat down across from each other, and Arthur ran a hand through his hair before speaking. Apex Solutions has been developing some breakthrough software, artificial intelligence, that can predict market trends with incredible accuracy. It's worth potentially billions of dollars, and it's made me some very powerful enemies. What kind of enemies? Eleanor asked, her brow furrowed. Competitors who want to steal the technology, investors who want to force me to sell the company, people who believe they can intimidate me into making decisions against my will. Arthur's jaw tightened. For the past 4 months, they've been trying different approaches, hacking attempts, industrial espionage, even outright threats. "And you think they're targeting me to get to you?" Eleanor asked, a chill running down her spine. "I think they saw us together last night and decided you might be someone they could use as leverage." Arthur reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Eleanor, I am so incredibly sorry. I never intended to put you in danger. This isn't your fault. You were simply helping me, but now you're caught up in something that has absolutely nothing to do with you, and I need to fix that." Margaret appeared in the doorway, her voice firm. "Are we going to sit here talking all day, or are we going to get out of here before whoever's in that car decides to do something more than just watch?" Arthur stood up immediately. "You're right. We should go." He carried their bags to the SUV while Eleanor and Margaret quickly locked up the house. As they walked to the car, Eleanor could distinctly feel eyes watching them from the dark sedan. She tried not to look directly at it, but her skin crawled with the unnerving knowledge that someone was meticulously studying their every move. Arthur opened the car doors for both women, ensuring Margaret was comfortably settled in the front passenger seat before helping Eleanor into the back. As he started the engine, he glanced in the rearview mirror. "The sedan's pulling out behind us," he said calmly. "Don't worry, I expected that." "What are we going to do?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. "Lose them." Arthur's voice was confident as he pulled away from the curb. "I've had to do this before." For the next 20 minutes, Arthur drove through the city with the honed skill of someone who knew every street and shortcut. He executed sudden turns, doubled back on himself, and expertly utilized parking garages and one-way streets to thoroughly confuse their tail. Eleanor watched through the rear window as the sedan fell progressively further behind until it finally disappeared from sight completely. "How did you learn to drive like that?" Margaret asked, sounding impressed despite the stressful circumstances. "Growing up in the city, plus a few defensive driving courses when the threats against me started getting serious," Arthur replied calmly. He turned onto a tree-lined street filled with elegant historic houses. "We're almost there." Arthur's house was more modest than Eleanor had anticipated. It was a beautiful colonial-style home with a wide front porch and meticulously maintained gardens, certainly not the sprawling mansion she had subconsciously imagined. It looked distinctly like a family home, rather than a billionaire's ostentatious showcase. "This is where you live?" Eleanor inquired as they pulled into the driveway. "I know it's not what you probably expected," Arthur said, a wistful note in his voice. "I could certainly afford something much larger, but this was my parents' house. I grew up here, and it feels like home in a way nowhere else ever truly could." The interior of the house instantly confirmed Eleanor's impression. The furniture was comfortable and inviting, rather than extravagantly fancy, and family photographs adorned the mantelpiece and various side tables. Everything was immaculately clean and well-maintained, yet it possessed a lived-in, welcoming warmth. "Your mother decorated this?" Margaret asked, running her hand along a handmade quilt draped over the back of the sofa. "Most of it, yes," Arthur confirmed. "I've changed a few things over the years, but I wanted to preserve the feeling she created." He set their bags down gently in the foyer. "She always said a house should feel like a hug when you walk through the door." Smart woman, Margaret approved warmly. Arthur then showed them to their rooms. Margaret would stay in the guest room on the first floor, which had its own bathroom and was conveniently close to the kitchen. Eleanor's room was upstairs, featuring a large window that overlooked the tranquil back garden. "This is beautiful," Eleanor said, looking around at the soft blue walls and antique furniture. "But I feel like we're imposing." "You're not imposing," Arthur assured her warmly. "You're helping me feel less alone in this big house." Arthur paused in the doorway. "And if you decide to take the job with my father, you'll need to be comfortable here anyway." "About that job, can you tell me more about what it would involve?" Eleanor asked. "Why don't I show you?" Arthur suggested. "He's in a memory care facility about 15 minutes from here. We could visit him this afternoon if you're feeling up to it." Eleanor nodded. "I'd like that." "Good. But first, let's get you both settled and fed. You must be exhausted." As Arthur went downstairs to prepare lunch, Eleanor began to unpack her few belongings in the spacious room. It had been years since she had stayed anywhere this comfortable, and she felt a peculiar mixture of gratitude and unease. She wasn't accustomed to accepting help, particularly not from someone she barely knew. Her mobile phone buzzed a text message from her supervisor at the hospital asking about her whereabouts. Eleanor realized with a jolt that she had been so consumed by the morning's harrowing events that she had completely forgotten to call in sick for her day shift at the clinic. She knew she was going to lose pay she couldn't afford to lose, but staying safe had to be the absolute priority. She was about to text back when she heard voices from downstairs. Arthur conversing with someone at the front door. The conversation sounded tense, and Eleanor, her curiosity piqued, crept silently to the top of the stairs to listen. "I told you I'm not interested in selling." Arthur's voice was firm. "Mr. Kingsley, you're being unreasonable. Our offer is more than generous," a smooth, authoritative voice replied. "Your offer is an attempt to steal my company for a mere fraction of what it's genuinely worth." Arthur countered sharply. "The answer is no. You might want to reconsider. Things could get very complicated for you if you keep refusing to cooperate." "Is that a threat?" Arthur's voice was dangerously calm. "It's a friendly warning. Good day, Mr. Kingsley." Eleanor heard the front door close, followed by Arthur's footsteps as he walked back towards the kitchen. She came downstairs to find him standing at the window, watching a black town car pull away from the curb. "More trouble?" she asked, her voice soft. Arthur turned, his expression grim. "Representatives from the Sentinel Group. They've been trying to acquire my company for months, becoming increasingly aggressive each time I refuse." "Do you think they're the ones who had us followed?" Eleanor whispered. "I'm starting to think so," Arthur admitted. "The Sentinel Group has a reputation for playing dirty when they desperately want something." Margaret appeared from the kitchen, where she had been making herself a cup of tea. "Sounds like you've made some powerful enemies, young man," she observed astutely. "I have. And I'm truly sorry you two got caught in the middle of it." "Don't apologize for standing up for yourself," Margaret said firmly, her voice imbued with a quiet strength. "But you need to be intelligent about how you handle this." "What do you mean?" Arthur asked, looking at Margaret with a newfound respect. "I mean, you can't just wait for them to escalate." Margaret explained, her gaze steady. "You need to take control of the situation. Evidence. If they're following people making threats, trying to intimidate you, then they are breaking the law. You need to document everything and get the authorities involved." "I've tried that." Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. "They're too careful, too well connected. Nothing sticks. Then you need to be smarter than they are." Margaret countered, unwavering. As they ate lunch together, Eleanor found herself observing Arthur carefully. He was clearly under immense pressure, yet he handled it with a grace and quiet determination that deeply impressed her. She also began to notice other subtle details, the way he ensured Margaret had everything she needed, how carefully he listened when either of them spoke, and the genuine concern in his eyes when he looked at her. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said as they were finishing their meal. "Of course. Why did you really offer me the job with your father? I mean, before all this started, was it just because you felt sorry for me?" Arthur was quiet for a moment, carefully considering his answer. "Partly yes. But mostly it was because I saw something in you that I recognized." What Eleanor prompted softly. "Someone who consistently puts other people's needs before their own, even when it costs them dearly." Arthur explained, meeting her eyes. "Someone who works incredibly hard but never complains about it. Someone who possesses a good heart despite having every reason to be bitter about life." He continued, "My father was very much like that. He would have liked you." Would have Eleanor asked gently, her heart aching for him. "He's still alive," Arthur clarified, a sad smile touching his lips. "But the man I knew is mostly gone. Some days he doesn't remember his own name, let alone mine." "That must be incredibly painful." Eleanor murmured, empathy etched on her face. "It is. But maybe having someone like you spend time with him would truly help. Even if he can't remember who you are, he might feel the kindness in your presence." "I'd like to meet him," Eleanor said, her decision firm. "Not just to consider the job, but because he's important to you." Arthur's smile was the first genuinely happy expression she'd seen from him all day. "Thank you. That means more to me than you could possibly know." As they prepared to leave for the memory care facility, Eleanor realized that somewhere in the span of 36 hours, her life had undergone a complete transformation. She was staying in a stranger's house, potentially embarking on a new career, and becoming embroiled in a situation that could prove genuinely dangerous. But for the first time in years, she felt a profound sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The Harmony Hills care residence was nothing like the typically sterile nursing homes Eleanor had encountered in her professional career. The building resembled a luxurious hotel with warm, inviting lighting, comfortable furnishings, and meticulously maintained gardens visible through every window. Soft classical music gently permeated the atmosphere, and the staff moved with the unhurried confidence of individuals who genuinely cared deeply about their work. "This is beautiful," Eleanor remarked as they walked through the main lobby. "I wanted the best for him," Arthur replied, signing them in at the reception desk. "He spent his entire life taking care of other people. He deserves to be somewhere that genuinely feels like home." They took the elevator to the second floor, where Arthur led them down a hallway adorned with family photographs and various artworks. He paused at a door with the Mr. Kingsley Sr. elegantly inscribed on a nameplate. "Before we go in," Arthur set his hand resting on the door handle. "I should warn you that he might not recognize me today. Sometimes he thinks I'm a stranger or that I'm someone from his distant past. It can be difficult." "I understand," Eleanor said gently. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." Arthur knocked softly before slowly opening the door. The room beyond was spacious and filled with natural light, a comfortable bed positioned to offer a view of the gardens. A man in his 70s sat in a recliner by the window, staring out at the trees with a distant contemplative expression. Robert Kingsley Sr. had evidently been a handsome man in his younger years, and traces of that remained in his strong jawline and intelligent eyes. But there was a new fragility to him now, a pervasive confusion that clouded his features and made him seem smaller than he likely once was. "Hi, Dad," Arthur said, approaching the chair slowly. "I brought some friends to meet you." Robert looked up at his son with polite interest, but no discernible recognition. "That's kind of you, young man. I don't get many visitors these days." Arthur's face tightened almost imperceptibly with pain, but he kept his voice steady. "This is Eleanor, and this is Margaret. They're nurses." Robert's expression brightened considerably. "My wife was a nurse. Beautiful woman, sharp as a whip." "Have you met her?" Robert inquired, a hopeful glint in his eyes. "No, sir. But I'd love to hear about her," Eleanor said kindly, pulling up a chair next to Robert's. Something in her gentle tone seemed to capture and focus his attention. "Maria was the finest nurse in the whole hospital," Robert declared, his voice gaining strength. "She could make anyone feel better just by walking into their room. She had this remarkable way of talking to people that made them feel truly seen, truly important." Arthur sat down on Robert's other side, and Eleanor observed how meticulously he positioned himself close enough to offer support, but not so close as to appear overwhelming or threatening if his father's confusion resurfaced. "She sounds wonderful," Eleanor said warmly. "What was your favorite thing about her?" Her laugh, Robert replied, a soft smile gracing his lips. "She laughed at everything. My terrible jokes, funny things that happened at work, even her own mistakes. She always said life was too short not to find joy in the little things." Robert's eyes grew distant for a moment. "I can still hear it sometimes when the wind blows through the trees just right." Margaret, who had been quietly observing the interaction, moved a little closer. "How long were you married, Robert?" she asked gently. 42 years, Robert responded without hesitation. "Best years of my life." Robert then looked at Margaret with a sudden sharp focus. "You remind me of her. You know, something about your eyes." "I'll take that as a compliment," Margaret said warmly, a genuine smile forming. For the next hour, they sat with Robert as he recounted stories about his beloved wife, his long career as an electrician, and fond memories from his son's childhood. Sometimes he was completely lucid, recalling details with perfect clarity. Other times, he seemed confused about the timeline of events or even whom he was speaking to. But throughout it all, Eleanor noticed that he responded remarkably well to patient, gentle conversation. "You're very good with him," Arthur said quietly to Eleanor when Robert momentarily dozed off in his chair. "He's a sweet man." "I can clearly see where you get your kindness from," Eleanor replied, her voice soft. "Some days he's angry or scared, doesn't want anyone near him. But today he seems so peaceful. Eleanor watched Robert's sleeping face, noting the subtle way Arthur's presence seemed to bring him comfort even when he didn't recognize his own son. Love doesn't disappear just because memory does. He might not remember who you are, but he feels safe with you. Do you really think so? Arthur asked, a hopeful vulnerability in his voice. I know so, Eleanor affirmed. It's something you learn when working with dementia patients. The emotional connections remain even when the cognitive ones fade. As they prepared to leave, Robert awoke and looked directly at Arthur. For a fleeting moment, his eyes were completely lucid. Thank you for coming to see me, son. I know it's hard. Arthur's breath hitched. Dad. But the moment of clarity was already gone, and Robert was looking at him with polite confusion again. I'm sorry. Do I know you? It's okay, Dad, Arthur said, leaning down to gently kiss his father's forehead. I'll see you tomorrow. In the car on the way back to Arthur's house, none of them spoke for several minutes, allowing the emotions of the visit to settle. Finally, Margaret broke the silence. He's lucky to have you, Arthur, she told him, her voice soft. Not everyone would visit every single day, especially when it's so painful. I keep hoping for more moments like that one at the end, Arthur confessed, his voice tinged with longing, where he remembers even if it's just for a second. Those moments are gifts, Eleanor said gently. They mean he's still fighting, still there, underneath everything else. Would you consider taking the job? Arthur asked, suddenly turning to her. I know it's a lot to ask, but I truly believe you could help him in ways the staff here can't. Eleanor had been contemplating this deeply since they had left the facility. What exactly would you need me to do? Spend time with him during the day, talk to him, perhaps read to him, or play music, Arthur explained. Help him with physical therapy exercises. Just be there, so he's not alone so much. And the pay? Eleanor asked, her heart aflutter. Arthur named a figure that made Eleanor's eyes widen considerably. It was more than she made at all three of her current jobs combined. That's too much, she said automatically, almost instinctively. No, it's not, Arthur disagreed firmly. It's what the job is worth to me. You'd be providing a service that's incredibly valuable. You'd be giving my father the kind of care and attention he deserves. And you'd be giving me peace of mind knowing he's not alone. Margaret turned in her seat to look at Eleanor, her expression warm and wise. Dear, sometimes you have to let people help you. This man is offering you good money for honest work. There's no shame in that. But what if I'm not good enough? What if I can't help him? Eleanor fretted, a familiar self-doubt creeping in. You helped him today, Arthur said firmly, his gaze unwavering. I saw it. He was calmer with you than he's been with anyone in months. Eleanor thought about her grandmother's mounting medical bills, about the crushing exhaustion of working 3 demanding jobs, about the profound possibility of finally having financial security for the very first time in her adult life. Okay, she said, finally, a deep breath escaping her. I'll try it, but I want to start slowly, maybe a few hours a day at first, to see how he responds to me. Whatever you're comfortable with, Arthur agreed readily. As they pulled into Arthur's driveway, Eleanor realized she was making a decision that would utterly change her life. She would be resigning from her other jobs, moving into Arthur's home, and becoming inextricably linked to his family's story. But more significantly, she was allowing herself to trust someone in a profound way she hadn't since her parents' passing. She was letting Arthur truly take care of her, and in turn, she was accepting the weighty responsibility of caring for the person who mattered most to him. That evening, as they sat in Arthur's living room after dinner, Eleanor found herself discreetly studying his face as he reviewed some business documents. He was handsome, certainly, but it was more than just physical attractiveness. There was a profound steadiness to him, a quiet strength that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. What are you thinking about? Arthur asked, looking up from his papers, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Just how strange life is, Eleanor mused. 24 hours ago, I was freezing at a bus stop, and now I'm sitting in your living room, planning to take care of your father. Do you regret it? He inquired, his gaze earnest. Eleanor considered the question seriously. No. Scared maybe, but not regretful. What scares you? Lots of things. Disappointing you. Not being able to truly help your father. Getting too comfortable with this arrangement. Why would getting comfortable be scary? Arthur pressed gently. Eleanor looked at him directly, her vulnerability exposed. Because I'm not used to depending on other people. I've been taking care of myself and my grandmother for so long, I've forgotten how to let anyone else help. Arthur set down his papers and leaned forward, his eyes warm. Maybe it's time to learn. Maybe it is. Eleanor whispered a soft admission. As they talked late into the evening, Eleanor felt something intangible shifting between them. The immediate crisis that had brought them together was still very much present, but underneath it, something warmer and far more personal was blossoming. She was beginning to see Arthur not just as her rescuer or her employer, but as a man she genuinely cared about. And from the way he occasionally looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, she suspected he might be feeling the same way. Eleanor's first week working with Robert Kingsley Sr. settled into a comfortable, almost natural routine. She would arrive at Harmony Hills at 9 in the morning and spend 4 hours with him, returning to Arthur's house in the afternoon to assist Margaret in settling in and preparing dinner. The arrangement felt remarkably natural, surprising even Eleanor. Robert seemed to respond exceptionally well to her presence. Some days he was more confused than others, but he rarely became agitated when she was around. She quickly learned to follow his lead in conversations, patiently allowing him to recount the same stories multiple times without correction, and finding simple activities that consistently brought him joy. "You're wonderful with him," Arthur said one evening as they strolled through his serene back garden. "The staff at Harmony Hills says he's been much calmer since you started visiting. He's a good man. It's easy to care about him even when he doesn't remember who you are," Eleanor replied, her voice soft. "Especially then. He's still your father, Arthur. The love you have for him is still there, even if he can't always recognize it." Arthur stopped walking and turned to face her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "How do you do that? Do what always know exactly the right thing to say, always make everything seem manageable, even when it feels utterly impossible." Eleanor felt a warm sensation spread through her chest at his earnest words. "I guess I've had practice dealing with difficult situations," she murmured. "It's more than that," Arthur insisted, his voice soft in the fading evening light. "You have this way of making people feel truly understood. I haven't felt this settled in a very long time." They were standing very close now, and Eleanor could faintly perceive the subtle scent of his cologne, could discern the way the setting sun brought out the flecks of gold in his warm brown eyes. For a fleeting moment she thought he might kiss her, and she realized with a surprising clarity that she very much wanted him to. But then her mobile phone rang, abruptly breaking the spell. The caller ID displayed her supervisor from the hospital. "I should take this," Eleanor said, stepping back slightly. "Eleanor, where have you been?" Her supervisor's voice was sharp with annoyance. "You've missed 4 shifts this week without proper notice." "I called in sick," Eleanor protested, though a cold dread began to form in her stomach. "Being sick for 4 days requires a doctor's note, which you haven't provided. I'm sorry, but I have to let you go." Eleanor's heart sank. She had been so completely focused on her new job with Robert that she had undeniably handled her old responsibilities poorly. "Please, I can explain," she pleaded, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. "The decision's already been made. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you." As Eleanor hung up the phone, Arthur moved closer. "What happened? I lost my job at the hospital," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I handled the transition badly. And now—" She paused, trying to steady herself. "Now I'm completely dependent on you. If this doesn't work out, I have nothing to fall back on." "Hey," Arthur's hands were gentle on her shoulders. "It's going to work out. You're amazing at what you do. And even if something happened with my father's care, I would help you find another position. You can't promise that. I can promise that. I won't let you end up back where you started, Eleanor. You're not alone anymore." The sheer sincerity in his voice tightened her chest with profound emotion. She had been fiercely independent for so long that accepting help felt like stepping off a perilous cliff, but Arthur made her feel like someone would truly catch her if she fell. Their moment of quiet intimacy was abruptly interrupted by the insistent buzzing of Arthur's phone. He looked at the screen, a deep frown settling on his face. "It's my security company. They only call if there's a serious problem. Mr. Kingsley." The voice on the other end was professional but urgent. "We've detected unusual activity around your property. Someone's been testing your security system." What kind of testing? Arthur demanded, his expression grim. "Checking sightlines, timing patrol routes, looking for weak points in your perimeter. We think someone's planning something." "How long has this been going on?" Arthur asked. "We noticed it yesterday, but it could have been happening longer. We've increased patrols and activated additional sensors." "Good. Keep me informed." As Arthur hung up, Eleanor felt a chilling dread that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. "This is because of me, isn't it?" she whispered. "Because they know I'm staying here. I'm putting you and my grandmother in danger. Maybe I should leave." "Absolutely not." Arthur's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. "If they're escalating, it's because their previous tactics aren't working. Running away won't solve anything. No buts. You're safer here than anywhere else. And I'm not going to let them intimidate us into making bad decisions." They went inside to find Margaret in the kitchen, meticulously putting away the dinner dishes. She took one look at their strained faces and slowly set down the dish towel. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Arthur explained about the security company's call, while Eleanor recounted losing her job. Margaret listened intently without interruption, her expression growing increasingly serious with each detail. "These people are playing for keeps," she declared, her voice firm. "Finally. They're not just trying to scare you anymore." "What do you think we should do?" Arthur asked, seeking her counsel. "Fight back," Margaret stated simply, but intelligently. Her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had faced and dealt with bullies throughout her life. "You cannot just wait for them to make the first move. The police said they need evidence of actual wrongdoing," Eleanor interjected. "Then we get them evidence," Margaret replied, a glint in her eye. "I mean, we set a trap. Give them something they want badly enough to break the law for. Then make absolutely sure we're recording when they do it." "Grandma, that sounds dangerous." Eleanor gasped, her eyes wide. "Everything worth doing is dangerous," dear Margaret responded, unwavering. "The question is whether you're going to let these people control your life or whether you're going to take control back." Arthur was quiet for a long moment, deeply in thought. "What kind of trap?" he murmured. "That's for you to figure out," Margaret said, rising to her feet. "But I know one thing. If you keep reacting to them instead of acting, they're going to win eventually." As they discussed various options late into the night, Eleanor found herself observing Arthur with a newfound appreciation. He was under enormous pressure, yet he handled it with a calm determination that profoundly impressed her. He listened intently to everyone's ideas, asked thoughtful, probing questions, and never once lost his temper even when the situation appeared utterly hopeless. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor inquired softly when Margaret had retired for the night. "Of course. Why is your company so important to you? I mean, why not just sell it and avoid all this trouble?" Arthur was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice thoughtful, "Because it's not just about the money. The software we've developed could genuinely change how people make financial decisions. It could help working families avoid bankruptcy, help small businesses succeed, help people plan for a secure retirement. If the Sentinel Group gains control of it, they'll use it to make themselves even richer while everyone else suffers. So this is about more than just your success." Eleanor realized, her heart swelling with admiration. "It's about making sure something good doesn't get corrupted by greed. That's why you're worth fighting for." Eleanor added, her gaze steady. Arthur looked at her with a flicker of surprise. "What, you could take their money and walk away?" Eleanor elaborated. "You could sell the company and live comfortably for the rest of your life, but you won't because you care more about doing the right thing than taking the easy path." "I don't feel very heroic right now," Arthur admitted, a small, wry smile on his lips. "Heroes never do," Eleanor replied softly. "That's what makes them heroes." As they said goodnight and retreated to their separate rooms, Eleanor realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with Arthur Kingsley. Not merely because he was kind and successful, but because he was the kind of man who would fight for what he believed in, even when it cost him everything. But as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that their troubles were only just beginning. Outside her window, she could hear the faint sound of cars driving slowly past the house, and she wondered if their enemies were already closer than they imagined. The decisive breakthrough arrived 3 days later in the most unexpected manner imaginable. Eleanor was at Harmony Hills with Robert Kingsley Sr., gently assisting him with his afternoon physical therapy exercises when she noticed a man in a maintenance uniform watching them intently through the window. At first, she dismissed it. The facility employed numerous maintenance workers, and it wasn't unusual to see them around the building. But something about the man's persistent gaze felt profoundly wrong. His attention was too focused, too intense for someone merely performing routine work. "Robert, I'll be right back," she said gently, settling him back into his chair. "I just need to check on something." She stepped into the hallway and looked towards the window, but the man had vanished. Eleanor walked directly to the nurse's station and inquired about the maintenance worker. What maintenance worker, the charge nurse asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "We don't have anyone scheduled for this floor today." Eleanor's blood ran cold. There was a man in a maintenance uniform watching Mr. Kingsley Sr.'s room. He was outside the window about 5 minutes ago. The nurse immediately contacted security, and within minutes the entire facility was conducting a thorough search. They found no sign of the intruder, but security footage clearly showed a man in coveralls entering through a side door that was supposed to be securely locked. "This is very serious," the security director informed Eleanor gravely. "We need to notify the police and Mr. Kingsley immediately." Arthur arrived at Harmony Hills within 20 minutes, his face etched with worry. "Are you okay? Is my father okay? We're both fine." But Arthur, they were watching him. Eleanor explained, her voice tight. "They know where he is." Arthur spoke swiftly with the security director and facility administrator, promptly arranging for additional security measures and restricted access to Robert Kingsley Sr.'s floor. Then he turned to Eleanor, his voice grim. "We need to get you out of here. If they're bold enough to break into a secure facility, they're escalating their tactics." "What about Robert?" Eleanor asked, concerned for his safety. "He'll be safe here," Arthur assured her. "Harmony Hills is significantly increasing security, and I'm hiring private guards for his floor. But you're the one they're truly after." As they drove back to Arthur's house, Eleanor felt a swirling mixture of fear and rising anger. Why are they doing this? What do they think they'll accomplish by threatening innocent people? They think they can break me down, make me desperate enough to accept their offer. Arthur replied, his hands clenched tightly on the steering wheel. "They're wrong. What if they're not? What if they keep escalating until someone gets hurt?" Eleanor pressed. "Then we stop them first," Arthur stated with grim determination. When they arrived at the house, Margaret met them at the door with a worried expression. "There's been a development," she announced. "The police called. They want to talk to both of you." Detective Amelia Stone was waiting in the living room, a serious-looking woman in her 40s with discerning eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had been investigating the threats against Arthur for many months and had finally made a significant breakthrough. "We arrested someone this morning," Detective Stone announced, her voice precise. "A private investigator named Mark Everett, who was caught attempting to hack into your company's servers. He's been working for the Sentinel Group." Arthur leaned forward, his gaze intense. "He's talking. He's trying to cut a deal," Detective Stone confirmed. "According to Everett, the Sentinel Group has been conducting what they call pressure campaigns against several tech companies they wish to acquire. This involves industrial espionage, intimidation, and even stalking family members. That's what's been happening to us," Eleanor said, a cold certainty settling in. "Exactly," Detective Stone agreed. "Everett says they've been watching both of you for weeks, trying to find leverage they could use against Mr. Kingsley. When they saw you together, they decided you might be someone he cared about. So they've been threatening her to get to me." Arthur asked, his voice low with barely contained fury. "Yes, but here's the thing. Everett is small time. He's not the one making the ultimate decisions. We think there's someone higher up in the Sentinel Group who's been orchestrating this entire campaign." Margaret spoke up from her armchair by the window, her voice steady. "Someone with a lot to lose if Arthur doesn't sell." "That's precisely our thinking," Detective Stone agreed. "We need to find out who's really behind this." "How do we do that?" Arthur asked, his gaze fixed on the detective. "By giving them what they want, or making them believe we are," Detective Stone explained. The detective's plan was straightforward, but inherently risky. Arthur would contact the Sentinel Group and agree to a meeting to discuss the potential sale of his company. During this meeting, he would be wearing a discreet wire, hoping to record the real decision-makers as they revealed their illegal tactics. "It's dangerous," Detective Stone warned, her expression serious. "If they realize what you're doing, they could become violent." "More dangerous than letting them continue to escalate," Arthur countered, his voice devoid of fear. "Probably not," the detective conceded. As they discussed the intricate details of the plan, Eleanor felt her anxiety mount. The mere idea of Arthur deliberately putting himself at such profound risk made her stomach clench with a terrifying fear. "I don't like this," she said quietly when the detective had left. "What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong," Arthur stated, his voice calm. "The police will be watching, and I'll be in a public place. But what if they figure out what you're doing?" Eleanor persisted, her voice laced with worry. Arthur moved closer to her, gently taking her hands in his. "Eleanor, I need you to trust me. This is the only way to end this situation. If we don't stop them now, they'll just keep coming after us. I know, but... She looked into his eyes, seeing the unwavering determination there, and her next words surprised them both with their raw honesty. I'm scared of losing you. Arthur's expression softened, and he reached up to gently cup her face. You're not going to lose me. I promise you that. You can't promise something like that, Eleanor whispered. Yes, I can. He insisted, his gaze tender. Because I have too much to live for now. He was going to kiss her this time. Eleanor could clearly see it in his eyes. But before he could, Margaret cleared her throat from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something else we need to discuss. They both turned to her. Margaret was holding a piece of paper, her expression grave. This was slipped under the front door while you were talking to the detective. I don't think it's good news. Arthur took the paper and read it aloud, his voice flat. Mr. Kingsley, your recent activities have been noted. We suggest you reconsider your position before someone gets hurt. This is your final warning. The three of them stared at each other in the chilling silence that followed. They know about the police investigation, Eleanor said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Which means they have someone on the inside, Arthur replied grimly. Or they've been watching the house, Margaret added, her eyes narrowing. Detective Stone returned within the hour, her expression grim when she saw the note. This changes things. If they know we're investigating, they might not take the bait. Or they might be more desperate, Arthur suggested, a flicker of cold determination in his eyes. More likely to make mistakes. More likely to be dangerous. You mean Eleanor clarified, a knot forming in her stomach. As they revised their plan, Eleanor realized that the situation had escalated far beyond simple intimidation. They were now dealing with individuals who were willing to overtly threaten violence to achieve their objectives. And she was terrified that Arthur might be walking into a trap that none of them could accurately predict or control. The crucial meeting with the Sentinel Group was scheduled for the next afternoon at the Grand Meridian Hotel downtown. Arthur would meet with their representatives in the hotel's bustling restaurant, a public space where the police could maintain surveillance discreetly without drawing undue attention. Eleanor spent the morning at Harmony Hills with Robert Kingsley Sr., attempting to distract herself from her gnawing worry about Arthur. But Robert, with a surprising clarity, seemed to sense her distraction. You're troubled about something he said during one of his clearer moments, his voice gentle. It's nothing, Robert. Just some work stress. It's about my son, isn't it? His eyes were surprisingly sharp as he looked at her, piercing through the fog of his condition. He's in some kind of trouble. Eleanor was startled by his profound awareness. What makes you say that I may not remember much? But I know, my boy Robert, replied, a faint, sad smile on his lips. He's got his mother's heart, always trying to do the right thing, even when it costs him. Robert reached out a frail hand and took hers. You care about him, don't you? Yes, I do. Eleanor confessed a lump in her throat. Good, Robert said, squeezing her hand gently. He needs someone who sees him for who he really is, not just what he's accomplished. Robert then looked at her again, his eyes clouded once more. Eleanor, do you remember who I am? He smiled sadly. Not always, but I remember that you're kind to me and that you make my son happy. That's enough. As Eleanor left Harmony Hills that afternoon, she felt a new profound sense of purpose. She wasn't merely worried about Arthur anymore. She was irrevocably part of his life, now part of his family. And that meant she had a crucial role to play in protecting what they had built together. She arrived at Arthur's house to find him meticulously getting ready for the meeting. He was wearing a dark suit and a tie, looking every inch the successful businessman, but she could discern the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his hands weren't quite steady as he adjusted his cufflinks. How are you feeling? Eleanor asked, her voice soft with concern. Nervous, determined, ready to end this. Arthur replied, his voice firm. Detective Stone arrived to brief Arthur on the wire he would be wearing and to meticulously go over the plan one more time. The device was minuscule and nearly imperceptible, yet Eleanor still felt a surge of anxiety about its potential discovery. Remember, your sole job is simply to get them talking, the detective instructed Arthur, her tone professional. Don't push too hard. Don't ask leading questions. Let them tell you what they want you to know. And if they threaten you directly, then we move in immediately. As Arthur prepared to leave, Eleanor gently caught his arm. Wait, I want to come with you. Absolutely not. It's far too dangerous, Arthur protested vehemently. I won't be in the meeting, but I could be in the hotel lobby or the coffee shop somewhere nearby where I can see what's happening," Eleanor insisted, moving closer to him. "Arthur, I can't focus on the meeting if I'm constantly worried about your safety. And I can't sit here doing nothing while you walk into a potentially dangerous situation. We're in this together now. That means we face it together." Detective Stone looked between them thoughtfully. "Actually, it might not be a bad idea. If something goes wrong, having someone nearby who knows the situation could be helpful." Arthur looked as though he wanted to argue further, but Margaret spoke up from her chair, her voice decisive. "Let her go, Arthur. The girl needs to feel like she's helping, and you could use the backup." "Fine," Arthur conceded reluctantly, "but you stay strictly in the lobby, and if anything seems wrong, you leave immediately." "I promise," Eleanor affirmed, a sense of grim determination settling within her. The Grand Meridian Hotel downtown was bustling with a mix of afternoon business travelers and curious tourists. Eleanor positioned herself strategically in the lobby coffee shop, securing a clear view of the restaurant entrance, while Detective Stone and her team discreetly spread out around the hotel. Arthur entered the restaurant precisely on time, and Eleanor watched as he was led to a table where two men in impeccably expensive suits were already waiting. Even from a distance, she could discern the underlying tension in Arthur's posture as he sat down. She'd been observing for about 10 minutes when she noticed something deeply troubling. A man in a hotel uniform was moving through the lobby, but his movement seemed too purposeful, too focused. He kept glancing towards the restaurant, and something about his behavior eerily reminded her of the fake maintenance worker at Harmony Hills. Eleanor pulled out her mobile phone and quickly texted Detective Stone, "Suspicious man in hotel uniform moving toward restaurant. Might not be staff." Within minutes, she observed plainclothes officers beginning to move discreetly through the lobby, but by then the man in the uniform had vanished. Inside the restaurant, Arthur was deep in conversation with the Sentinel Group representatives. Eleanor couldn't discern their words, but their body language clearly indicated the discussion was intense. Then Eleanor saw something that made her blood run absolutely cold. The man in the hotel uniform was now positioned behind the bar within the restaurant itself, and he was moving purposefully towards Arthur's table, carrying what appeared to be a drink tray. She immediately called Detective Stone. "He's in the restaurant approaching Arthur's table. He's disguised as a server. We're moving now." Detective Stone's voice crackled through the phone, but Eleanor realized with a horrifying jolt that they might not be fast enough. The fake server was almost at Arthur's table, and she could clearly see him reaching subtly under the tray for something. Without a moment's hesitation, without even a thought for her own safety, she bolted from the coffee shop and rushed towards the restaurant entrance. "Excuse me," she called out loudly, her voice piercing the ambient hum of the dining area. "Arthur, I'm so incredibly sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call for you." Every head in the restaurant turned towards her, including Arthur's and those of the Sentinel Group representatives, but most crucially, the fake server froze, his hands still paused under the tray. Arthur looked momentarily confused, but instantly played along. "Of course, gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for just a moment." As Arthur stood up, Detective Stone and her team swiftly entered the restaurant. The fake server attempted to back away, but there was nowhere to go. "Police, nobody move," a clear voice commanded. The next few minutes dissolved into utter chaos. The fake server, who was indeed found to be carrying a syringe filled with an unknown substance, was apprehended along with the two Sentinel Group representatives. Other diners were quickly and calmly evacuated while the police meticulously secured the scene. "What was in the syringe?" Arthur asked Detective Stone as they gave their statements, his voice still shaken. "We won't know until it's thoroughly tested," Detective Stone replied, her expression grim. "But my guess is some kind of powerful sedative. They probably plan to drug you and make it appear as though you'd suffered some kind of sudden medical episode. And then what Arthur's voice was strained. Probably rush you to a hospital they controlled where they could keep you incapacitated while they forcibly push through a sale of your company," Detective Stone concluded. Arthur looked visibly shaken by how perilously close he had come to profound danger. If Eleanor hadn't been there, "She saved your life," Detective Stone stated simply, her gaze appreciative. Her quick thinking prevented a kidnapping at minimum, and quite possibly something far worse. As they departed the hotel, Arthur remained unusually quiet, processing the gravity of the situation. Eleanor walked beside him, still grappling with the adrenaline and the shocking events that had just unfolded. "Are you okay?" she asked softly as they got into his car. "I should be asking you that," Arthur replied, his voice laced with emotion. You put yourself at such risk to save me. I told you we were in this together." Arthur pulled over at the very first parking lot they encountered and turned to face her. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What?" Eleanor whispered, her heart pounding. "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw, profoundly vulnerable. Eleanor felt her heart skip a beat, a sudden rush of warmth flooding her. "Eleanor, I know the timing is terrible, and I know this whole situation is incredibly complicated, but I couldn't go another day without telling you how I feel." "The timing isn't terrible," she said softly, her voice infused with a burgeoning hope. "And the situation isn't too complicated." "What are you saying?" Arthur asked, his eyes searching hers. "I'm saying I'm falling in love with you too." This time, nothing interrupted them. Arthur leaned across the space between them and kissed her gently, and Eleanor felt as though everything in her life had finally profoundly fallen into place. When they finally broke apart, Arthur rested his forehead against hers, a quiet contentment settling over them. "What happens now?" Arthur murmured. "Now we go home and figure out our future together," Eleanor replied, her voice steady and full of promise. "Together, together." As they drove back to Arthur's house, Eleanor realized that what had begun as arguably the worst night of her life had somehow led to the best thing that had ever happened to her. She had found not just profound love, but a deep sense of belonging she had never truly experienced before. But first, they had to ensure the Sentinel Group could never threaten them again. The arrests at the Grand Meridian Hotel had completely exposed the Sentinel Group's illegal operations. Within 48 hours, Detective Stone had obtained search warrants for their corporate offices and had uncovered irrefutable evidence of similar intimidation campaigns against dozens of other companies. "It was far bigger than we initially thought," Detective Stone told Arthur and Eleanor as they met in her office. "The Sentinel Group has been systematically targeting small tech companies for years, utilizing everything from industrial espionage to outright kidnapping attempts. What happens to them now?" Eleanor asked, a sense of righteous satisfaction growing within her. "The executives we arrested are facing serious federal charges. Conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, corporate espionage," Detective Stone confirmed. "They're going away for a very long time." Arthur leaned back in his chair, a profound sense of relief washing over his face for the first time in months. "So, it's really over. The immediate threat is over." "Yes," Detective Stone assured him. "The Sentinel Group is finished as a company, and their leadership is facing prosecution. You can go back to running your business without constantly looking over your shoulder." As they left the police station, Arthur instinctively took Eleanor's hand. "I have something I want to show you." He drove them to a beautiful, serene park overlooking the city, where they walked along a winding path lined with flowering trees. The afternoon sun was warm and comforting on their faces, and for the very first time since they had met, Eleanor felt a profound, genuine peace. "This is where I used to come with my parents when I was a child," Arthur said as they reached a quiet bench with an expansive view of the downtown skyline. "My mother would pack sandwiches, and we'd spend the whole afternoon here. It's beautiful. I wanted to bring you here because this is where I truly realized what I wanted my life to look like." He turned to face her, his eyes filled with tender emotion. "Eleanor, these past few weeks with you have been the happiest I've been since my mother passed away. You've brought light into my life in a way I didn't think was possible anymore." "Arthur, you've changed my life completely," Eleanor replied, her voice soft with gratitude. "Not just financially, but emotionally. You've shown me what it feels like to be truly cared for. I want to keep caring for you for the rest of my life, if you'll let me," Arthur said, his voice earnest. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we haven't been together very long, and I know this might seem sudden," he began, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "but I've never been more certain of anything in my entire life." He opened the box to reveal a simple, yet exquisitely elegant diamond ring. "Eleanor Vance, will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes as she gazed at the shimmering ring, then at Arthur's hopeful, expectant face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." As Arthur slipped the ring onto her finger, Eleanor felt as though her entire world had decisively shifted into its rightful place. The scared, exhausted woman who had been stranded at a bus stop just weeks ago was gone, replaced by someone who felt cherished and secure and profoundly loved. "I can't believe this is real," she said, admiring the way the diamond exquisitely caught the light. "It's real." "We're real," Arthur whispered, pulling her close and kissing her softly, "and we're going to have an amazing life together." They spent the remainder of the afternoon joyfully making plans. Arthur expressed his desire to have the wedding soon, stating he didn't wish to wait any longer than absolutely necessary to make Eleanor officially a part of his family. They would reside in his beloved childhood home, which already felt like a true home to Eleanor as well. "What about my job with your father?" Eleanor asked as they walked back to the car. "I hope you'll continue doing it at least part-time," Arthur replied sincerely. "He's made so much progress since you started working with him. But if you decide you want to do something else, we'll figure it out together. I love working with Robert," Eleanor said, a genuine warmth in her voice. "He's become like a grandfather to me." "He loves you too," Arthur confirmed. "Even on his most confused days, he asks about you." When they arrived back at the house, Margaret was waiting in the kitchen, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "Well," she said, her gaze fixed on Eleanor's left hand, "did that boy finally work up the courage to propose you knew?" Eleanor exclaimed, laughing with genuine delight. "Honey, he's been carrying that ring around for a week." Margaret chuckled. "I was starting to think I'd have to propose for him." As the late afternoon sun began to slip behind the horizon, painting the sky with soft streaks of amber, and Rose, Eleanor, and Arthur sat side by side on the quiet park bench, her newly adorned hand resting gently in his. For a long time, neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. The quiet hum of city life in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the summer wind, and the comforting warmth between them spoke volumes more than any declaration could. Eleanor felt the weight of the ring on her finger, not just its physical presence, but everything it meant. Safety, love, the end of surviving alone. For the first time in years, she wasn't measuring her decisions against the cost of rent, the price of medication, or how many hours of sleep she could trade for another paycheck. She was thinking about a future, a real one, and it terrified her just as much as it comforted her. "I still don't understand how we got here," she murmured finally, her voice a mix of awe and hesitation. Arthur turned toward her, a soft laugh escaping his lips. "Neither do I," he admitted, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face with the back of his fingers. "But I do know that I'm not letting it go. Not this. Not you." She looked at him, her chest tightening. "It's not just about you and me anymore, Arthur. Your father, my grandmother, your company. Everything around us is heavy, complicated. You sure you want to pull me into all of it permanently?" Arthur didn't flinch. He didn't look away. "You're not being pulled into anything. You've already been carrying more than your share, Eleanor. I just want to carry it with you." By the time they returned to the house, the evening air had cooled, and the porch lights cast a soft glow across the front yard. Inside, Margaret was setting down 2 mugs of chamomile tea, her movements slow but steady. She looked up as they entered, and her sharp eyes immediately landed on Eleanor's hand, her lips pressed into a knowing line. So she said, calmly, folding her arms. He asked. Eleanor nodded, eyes glistening. Margaret didn't rush to embrace her. Instead, she walked over, took Eleanor's hand in hers, and examined the ring quietly for a long moment. Then she looked up and met Arthur's eyes. "And you understand what it means to take on my granddaughter, do you?" she asked, her tone serious, but not unkind. Arthur nodded without hesitation. "Yes, ma'am, I do, and I want to." Margaret held his gaze a second longer before nodding, once satisfied. "Good," she said, "because this family doesn't run from trouble. We stand our ground together." Later that night, as the house settled into its nightly silence, Eleanor found herself lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart thudding with a quiet storm of gratitude and fear. She was grateful for Arthur for his unwavering kindness, for how he saw her without pity. But the fear was harder to name. It wasn't the fear of commitment or even of being hurt. It was the fear of finally having something good and losing it. She turned over and glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. Downstairs, a faint light was still on in the study. She slipped on her robe and padded quietly through the hall. Arthur was at his desk, papers spread out before him, his jaw tight with concentration. She leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "You know it's late," she said softly. Arthur looked up, startled for a second, then smiled. "I know. There's a lot to sort through with the board. They want to meet tomorrow morning to discuss the fallout with Sentinel. Some of them are scared. They want to pull out." Eleanor crossed the room and sat across from him. "Let me guess, because a few of them think if they back away now, they can salvage their investments." Arthur sighed. "Exactly. They don't care that Sentinel almost got me drugged and abducted in a restaurant. They only care about the headlines, the stock impact, and not being on the wrong side of a scandal. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. I've spent years building something that was supposed to help people. Now I have to fight off not just criminals, but cowards. His voice cracked at the end. Eleanor reached across the table and took his hand. You're not fighting alone. You've got me, Margaret, Detective Stone, your father. We all believe in what you're trying to protect. Arthur's expression softened. Then help me tomorrow. Come to the board meeting. Just sit in. Let them see the person we're protecting this for. Not a press release. A real person. Someone who matters. Eleanor hesitated. You think they'll care what I say? Arthur looked at her unwavering. They should. The next morning, the boardroom on the top floor of Apex Solutions buzzed with low voices and rustling paper. The walls were glass, the furniture sleek, but the mood was anything but polished. Eleanor walked in beside Arthur, dressed in a soft navy blouse and slacks Margaret had carefully pressed that morning. She was nervous but composed. Her presence drew curious glances, some surprised, others skeptical. Arthur introduced her simply. This is Eleanor Vance. She's here because she's the reason we're not having this meeting at a funeral. The room fell silent. Arthur sat at the head of the table and began. I know what you're all thinking, that it might be safer to let this go. That selling would quiet the noise. But if we give in to people who threaten our lives to get what they want, we lose more than a company. We lose our integrity. Eleanor listened as the conversation turned heated, one man arguing about market cap, another citing legal liabilities. Finally, Arthur gestured toward Eleanor. You want to know why I'm fighting so hard? Ask her. Every eye turned to her. She stood slowly, heart racing, but her voice didn't shake. I'm not an executive. I don't know your quarterly projections or what your shareholders expect, but I do know what it means to work 3 jobs and still fall short. I know what it feels like to be invisible, and I know that the technology you're developing, what Arthur is building, has the power to shift that, to give people like me a fighting chance. She looked around the table, not pleading, but steady. If you walk away now, you're not just giving up a company, you're giving up people you've never even met, people who deserve better. The room was quiet. One by one, heads began to nod. Arthur's hand found hers beneath the table. By the end of the meeting, the board had voted unanimously to stand with him. That afternoon, as they left the building, Arthur received a call from Detective Stone. You might want to turn on the news, she said. The federal indictment just went public. The Sentinel Group is finished. Their CEO was arrested this morning. We've got them on multiple counts, including attempted kidnapping, fraud, and corporate sabotage. It's over, Arthur. For real this time. Arthur exhaled slowly. Thank you, Detective. He hung up and turned to Eleanor, his expression caught between disbelief and relief. It's done, he said. They're gone. She stared at him for a long moment, then smiled. Then let's go home. That night, they returned to the quiet of the house, to the familiar sound of Margaret's laughter in the kitchen and the soft jazz humming from the living room speakers. Eleanor helped Arthur's father settle in with a warm blanket and a cup of tea, and for the first time in weeks, he looked up at her and said, Thank you, sweetheart. You always take such good care of me. She froze, then smiled. Of course, she whispered. Always. Arthur stood behind her, watching, heart full. This was what they had fought for. Not just justice, but moments like this. Real, small, ordinary grace. Later that evening, Eleanor stepped out onto the back porch, mug in hand, stars scattered across the sky like quiet witnesses. Arthur joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. You sure about this? He asked, his voice low. The company, the engagement, all of it. Eleanor leaned into him, eyes fixed on the horizon. For the first time in my life, she said, I'm not surviving. I'm living, and I'm not going back. Arthur pressed a kiss to her temple, and together they stood there in the stillness of their new beginning, knowing whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Thank you truly for staying with us through this entire journey. If you've made it to this point, your heart has walked beside Eleanor, Arthur, Margaret, and Robert, feeling every quiet heartbreak, every flicker of hope, every stand for justice and dignity. Stories like these aren't just tales on a screen, they're reflections of the resilience, kindness, and humanity we still believe in. And if this story touched something in you, even in the smallest way, know that your presence here matters. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and tell us how this story made you feel. Whether it stirred your sense of compassion, reminded you of someone you love, or made you think about the quiet strength in everyday people, your voice belongs here too. You are part of this space where stories aren't just watched, they're felt. We're so grateful for your support. Every view, every word of encouragement, every moment of your time means more than we can say. If you found meaning in this story, whether in the courage, the tenderness, or the quiet triumph, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep telling the kind of stories that believe in people, in second chances, in doing what's right, even when it's hard. Until the next chapter, take care of yourself and those you love. We'll see you soon with more stories that speak to the heart, honor the unsung, and remind us all that no matter what we're facing, we're not alone. See you in the next one.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.